Hello all you beautiful people, and welcome back to EUC A Way of Life. This video is going to be a two-part video, one of the Mten4s and their display issues. I'm not sure how many people have been having issues with their displays, but I know myself and a few others are. And then the T4s. So as most of you know, with the Begode T4s, the Masters, the Master Pros, almost all of them in cold temperatures will have a display issue where the display will not come on at all. This one here is the V1, that one there is the V2, and one thing I did notice is with the V1, the lights would occasionally work if the display did not work. However, with the V2, if the display didn't work, none of the lights worked at all, the headlight and the tail light. So both of these wheels currently have been a huge disappointment to me because by the time I'm off work, it's dark outside, and I really don't want to have to equip these wheels with aftermarket lighting systems to go ride down to town to the tap room or groceries or whatever when I get home. So a bit frustrated with these wheels here. And something to note with the V2, when the wheel does warm up long enough, the display will work, the headlight will work. However, check your guys' tail lights, because I've noticed with the V2 that even though the display and the headlight work, the tail lights will partially work. Sometimes one works, sometimes the other one has just a blue LED on or a red LED on, sometimes they don't work at all. A lot of people have mentioned for these two particular wheels and the Masters is that if you leave them inside and they stay warm, you have no issue. I agree to that. However, I don't agree to be able to have them in a cold environment like your garage or car when it's 30 degrees outside and bringing them in to warm them up. It's an extended period of time and it's not worth it. I tried riding both of these last week by doing that process, and neither one had any lighting that worked. I brought them into my bathroom, which is a tile room. It's the hottest room in my house for some reason. I left them in there for about a half an hour. I took that one out to ride. I rode it around for like 15 minutes. Lights still did not work. Brought it in, swapped out for this one, so 45 minutes or so in the bathroom at 80 degrees, and it didn't work at all. Brought it back, turned that one on in the bathroom, and it still didn't work. So even one, letting it sit in the warm room for a half hour, and two, riding around for 10-15 minutes, did not enable those screens and lights to work. So there is fixes for it. I'm going to get into that, but we're going to start with the Mten4 because it is the easier of the two fixes. As most of you know, it is just 6 of these little screws that hold in the top panel. There is 3 on each side, and they are just a Phillips head, probably an M2 screw, and then the top panel comes off. So I will show you what it looks like when the display doesn't work. Obviously it just doesn't turn on. Mine is currently working because this wheel is warm enough. I did move it over to show you an example. So if you turn the wheel on, there's no display. Turn the wheel on, obviously you have a display. So I have noticed, and I think one way you could tell if the screen is either going bad or having issues, is that some of the numbers or parts of the screen, like the Begode down at the bottom, will be not lit up properly. So keep that in mind. And I did figure out if you turn on the wheel in this mode, the motor doesn't kick on, which is kind of nice. So something to note, unlike the T4s, the Masters, the Master Pros, and all that, when the wheel is on, the light still works. The tail lights also work, as you can see on my hand here. So it is just the screen that is affected by cold temperatures, supposedly on the Mten4s. Whereas the T4s and everything else related to the T4 It's all of the lighting. Supposedly it's the board driver for the display and the DC driver for the lights, which is kind of unfortunate that it's two boards. However, Begode is sending them out. So once you get those screws out, this does just pop right off, as a lot of you know if you've watched my other videos. And like I said, I unplugged this ahead of time so you guys could see. It is just a tiny little board, and the cool thing is they kind of made it modular in a way if issues like these arise, so you don't have to, do any soldering or know much about electronics. As you can see, this one does not have my clip fix, and it has not been pulling out. You could see how long these motor wires are here, the battery wires, sorry. Everybody keeps saying motor wires. The battery wires, they're kinked over in kind of an S shape, whereas that one, they're like barely even long enough for that connector to see all the way. So this one had a little bit of separation at first. I mentioned it a while back, but it does in fact have long enough wire, so I don't think this one is going to have an issue. Somebody did make a post today asking about this, and people have commented on my YouTube asking about this, if the newer generations have the same issue or if all of them have the same issue. And this is a perfect example. I own two, got them both at the same time. One has the issue, one doesn't have the issue. Not saying this won't pull out, but obviously with the length of wires, it should not. That is obviously the board for the display, and you can see the pins on the back of it there. It just goes into these two little female connection points there. Looking at the board itself, I do not see anything special. I mean, I am no engineer, electrical engineer, so I don't know if just replacing this on the Mten4 will in fact fix the screens, but I will keep you guys posted further on if my replacement one does work. This wheel has not had any of the display issues, so funny enough, it has the battery cable connector issue, but no screen issue. This one, battery connector is obviously better, wires are longer, but it has the display issue. So, if you do see that sheen there, they did completely coat all of the electronics in the back in a silicone, which is very nice, and same thing with all the components on the board. So as I mentioned before, this wheel is very, very water resistant, and I would not hesitate at all to ride it through puddles or in the rain or anything of the above. You're going to be pretty well off with this wheel. Obviously, motor bearing issues are always a problem over time with long exposure to water and elements of that nature. So, oops, here is the new one, and it obviously looks identical to the old one. This one looks like it has some kind of code on there. Not sure if that's a date code, only thing on it. So, don't know if they're much difference. Ooh, 103P 3.5, 2232. 103P 3.5, 2127. Doesn't look like they're date codes, but one is newer than the other supposedly, and they will fix the issue supposedly. This one does still have the silicone on it, so it should be just the same as that one. Again, I'll keep you guys posted if it works. This wheel wasn't cold enough, so this screen did turn on, so I'm not going to do a quick example. And I'm going to start tearing into that wheel and show you how to fix the display on the T4. So hang in there. And we're back. So already a quick update with this. I turned the wheel on and the new display did not work at all. Okay, don't get mad everybody. Hang in there for a second. Something I did notice, when you push the power button, the first thing that comes on is the display, and then the rest of the unit turns on. However, when you're having the defective display issue, when you push the power button, the wheel actually turns on a split second before the display does. So, back to the new screen didn't work when I plugged it in. It has these little female connections here, and obviously you can see that one is loose and that one is not as loose, and then these male pins go into those female channels. So what I noticed was when I plugged this in to the holes, it felt a little bit sloppy or loose. You know, like if you've ever had a really old house outlet and you plug things into it and they kind of droop out of it, and you'll either bend the prongs in or bend them out and stuff it back in there to kind of hold it in place. That is exactly what this display did. So when I put it in there, it didn't work at all. And I was like, that seems strange. And I pulled it out and it felt kind of loose. So I pushed it back in there and I kind of pried up on it a little bit to bend those pins. You can see that they're angled down a smidge on just the one side, which is odd. Must be the loose side. And the display worked. So for those who do have, I'm going to put it in quotes again, defective displays, I would suggest, before throwing a fit about it or contacting your dealer, to push on the board a little bit one way or the other to see if you could kind of tighten up the male pins into the female channels and have the display work properly. So food for thought. I will be into the T4 here in a second. Hello everybody that's sticking with the video. This is a long one. So I have now torn, this is the V1 T4, apart to show you where the components are to fix the issues with the display and lights and what those components look like. To add to my next video, the boards are all covered in silicone on all the electrical components, even the charger board there. So this wheel is fairly water resistant. So to get down to this, I wouldn't suggest this to your average rider for a repair. Obviously you could see 90% of it is unplugged, and I'm halfway down inside of the wheel taking apart electronics just to fix the display. So this board has the display on it. It's the one that sits on the very top this way. This board does not contain the components that actually fix the display and lights issues. The next board down from the display board is this board. I don't know obviously what everything on this board does, but you can see this board here, and the bigger one is covered in silicone on all the electrical components and connections. So again, very water resistant. This board here, I believe, is the DC-DC driver board or buck converter that changes the 100.8 volts to a 12 volt system for all of the lights and the display to work. Once you take out this board, let's step back a little bit. This one's held in with 4 screws, super easy. Only one thing's plugged into it. So when you get to this point, you're like, ah, not too shabby, eh? Below that board being this board, which is sitting in here like a dece, there's only 2 screws that hold this in. And again, as you can see, there's 1 plug there and 2 plugs there. So not a whole lot going into this. However, to get to some of the stuff and to wiggle this out of there, you do basically have to unplug everything. I always unplug the batteries just to be safe and discharge the wheel. However, there's quite a bit you have to do. So you unplug the 3 things, 2 screws, this pops out. Oh, sorry, there's another connector there and another connector there. So you got what, 5 connectors now? So 5 connectors on this thing, and then it comes out. So you're getting down into some nitty gritty. And then in here, obviously you can see the MOSFETs there. There is 12 in this one. You can see these are the female pins that that board itself connects into. You can see the studs here that the other boards screw into. That right there is the tiny little board that supposedly fixes the display issue. So my problem and dilemma here is the bigger board here looks like the buck converter to me. You guys could correct me if I am wrong. I am not an electrical engineer, nor do I know that much about these components. I'm just really good at tearing things apart and fixing things. from alienrides was provided. Oh Lord, it's probably broken now. This board, alienrides, I might need another one, I'm sorry. I was provided this board, which plugs into the top board there. Don't worry, no pins were bent in the making of this video. And then I was also provided this smaller board, which is supposedly supposed to fix all the issues. Don't know if that's correct or not. This one was provided to me by Freemotion. It was in just a standard plastic bag. I'm not offended, some people might be. alienrides sent me theirs in a nice little anti-static bag, because we all know static could short these tiny little boards and they're toast. So good on you, alienrides, because I doubt Begode sent it to you this way. Needless to say, this V1 will only have this tiny little board replaced. We will see if that fixes both the display and the front head and tail light issues. If it does not, then I'm going to have to also replace this board, which I asked Freemotion to make sure I'm getting all of the components, and I was only sent the little board. So thank you again, alienrides, for getting me both boards to fix the problem at once rather than having to take the wheel apart twice, possibly. So the V2 over there will get both the larger replacement board and the smaller board. Something else I want to know when it comes to this stuff. This board was on top, obviously, before I started dismounting things. And unfortunately, if you look in there, the pins I pulled out because I was trying to remove this board, but it's all silicone together. So I did not want to pull, you could even see over here, it's all silicone down. I did not want to pull this top board out while it was still in the wheel because I didn't want to bend or potentially damage anything else. So as far as this board being easily replaceable, not really, and you do have to get down to the nitty-gritty to get this out to replace that. I am going to pause the video to take that off to tell you how difficult it is, but for the little small board, sorry, we're on this side, in here, it's just like the Mten4 display. Kind of wiggle it a little bit. They use a little bit of silicone on there, on the connection point possibly, yep, just a little bit. It just pops right out. Easy peasy, again, covered in silicone, fairly water resistant. So not too difficult for this component here. So I will get back to you guys in just a second when I get the other board torn off, and hopefully I don't break anything in the process. But again, I'll be able to let you guys know in the future, in this cold weather we're now having, if this one still has the light issues but the display works, or vice versa, or if anything's wrong with it at all moving forward. That one I have both boards I'm replacing, so I'm hoping that one no longer has any issues. Stay tuned. Alright, all you beautiful people, welcome back to the mess that is my garage. So, back to this board. It is siliconed underneath, on the connector, and underneath. I had to take an X-Acto knife and cut underneath all of it to get it to detach. So, oh Lord, where'd this one come from? Just kidding, that's a bad one. So as you can see, it was pretty much silicone all the way around. I mean, good on that for really kind of securing it, I guess you would say. However, look, the pins are actually much longer. So waive my concerns about this barely being connected earlier. Sometimes we make mistakes and we have to admit to our faults. However, old board, again, don't know what these are, but what does it say on there? I don't know, it's always some kind of manufacturer code that doesn't mean anything to me. This is the new one, much smaller. It's shaped slightly different. It has a lot more components on the top, like way more components on the top. And if we flip it around here, the little guy here is much smaller, and then it has capacitor on each side, and this one has the two on this side. And again, whatever those, they look like MOSFETs to me. Not sure why this board would have MOSFETs, but MOSFETs there, two capacitors there, new board, much smaller, capacitor on each side, and then a lot more low components on this side. So obviously this guy will just go into that there, plug in there nice like, because the other one was silicone on there and that obviously has some wiggle. I'm probably going to take the E6000 glue that alienrides was so kind to provide me and glue it down, and I want to get back to this here. Look at that, almost no wobble. What I did, because there's pins on one side and the other, is I bent the pins on that side out that way a little bit, and I bent the pins on the back side toward, oh, I guess it's the front of the wheel. The back pins are bent towards the back of the wheel, front pins are bent towards the front of the wheel. I mean, just a hair. You're talking just a very, very tiny amount, and you could bend them with your fingernail. So again, you know, doing all of this, not for the faint of heart. Also, the gasket comes loose and stuff, so you're gonna have to make sure to seat everything properly and connect everything back in and everything back in the order you took it all apart. You know, make sure not to miss anything. One thing, if you are not familiar with, you know, taking things apart, is always take pictures. Always take pictures. You know, what I've done before, like when I took apart that wheel for the first time, is take a picture of each step, go into your photo album and put in text, you know, this is what it is, or this is what connector goes where, and then you kind of have a back trail to go back on if you have to walk away from your project or you forget where you're at or whatever. Look at those sliders poking out the bottom. I don't know about you, but that's concerning to me. I'm waiting for those to get damaged. Maybe 10 miles, 15 miles since the slider's in. You can see how dirty that bottom one is. So we'll be reporting on that obviously in the future. But, you know, just back to this. It is a project. It's not crazy difficult. However, a lot of people are uncomfortable with electronics, and this obviously is not an easy project. However, everything's pins, everything's plugs. There's no soldering, there's no special things you have to do. You know, you're very, very unlikely to get shocked by any of this because, you know, the capacitors are covered, everything's silicone. Unless you're trying to stick your tongue in those holes, you're not likely to get shocked. So take on the project if you wish. If you could send your wheel in to have it fixed, send it in. But again, in my opinion, even getting down to this little board, if that's the issue, to fix the problems, you know, don't put your dealer through having to pay for sending your wheel either way and doing the labor. It's just not worth it. You know, it's not a hard project. Take your pictures as you tear it apart, and you could easily do it yourself, and all they have to do is send you the little part. So it's not their fault. It's not the dealer's fault. It's the manufacturer's fault. As long as the manufacturer is providing the parts, you know, videos like mine or other people's that might go more into depth about taking the entire thing apart should be plenty enough for most people to be able to take on the project. So, and we're back again. So I did want to show you guys the difference between the inside of the V1 and the V2. I do apologize for the video being so long. Hopefully you guys have stayed tuned for all of the effort. However, this one was much easier to take apart. This is the V1 to get down to that little board down there. This one only had 2 screws that went through the display board, and then this entire board comes out. But as you can see, I'm kind of wiggling it here, and it doesn't want to come out. Not sure what's holding it up. I'm gonna have to move a few things out of the way, but the V1 and the V2 both have this same little butt converter board. So thank you again, alienrides, for sending me the new updated one, because that should hopefully fix a problem, if not fix the problem or a problem. Either way, hopefully the V1 doesn't have issues since I did not get that board. So stay tuned. Again, I will be pulling this apart the rest of the way here in a second. And we are back again. So unlike that one, the V1 here, how the board's down in there, since this one has a completely different layout, Both these boards come out at the same time. As you can see, the standoffs that I'm assuming are soldered, hopefully not glued to the boards. The screws that hold in the display go all the way through all three boards and hold all three boards together. Not sure how I feel about that, but that means the screw goes into this bottom one here or through the bottom one into the chassis, so it might technically be a little bit more secure. However, in my opinion, from disassembling the V1 to mostly disassembling the V2, I would say if you have a V1 and you need your display fixed, do it at this point. It's not that difficult. It's pretty easy. If you guys need, I will make a full-on walkthrough. However, with the V2, because we're pulling out the bottom board too, the thermal paste strip, thermal pad, is on this bottom board. So you obviously have to be very careful getting your fingers underneath there and not messing up that thermal paste, rolling it back on itself or anything of the above, as well as, obviously you could see my crooked mess going on here. I still can't get that side, the left side of it, out of the chassis all the way. However, since the little board is right there, I unplugged one motor cord, because I had to be able to pry the board apart enough, pulling out the pins, to be able to gain access to that smaller board. So again, the bigger one here is the old version style, and I will be replacing both of these on this V2, whereas on the V1 I only replaced the small one. So for the V2, again, not crazy difficult, however, a lot more difficult than the V1. So attempting it, if you guys know what you're doing, guys and gals, whoever, all genders of anything, do it. Don't send it to the dealer. Again, it's not their fault. It's a lot of work for them to have to go through when it's all just plug and play components. Everything's color coordinated. All the plugs are different as far as how many pins they have or the colors, so it would be pretty difficult to not put everything back together properly. However, again, you could obviously risk damage to the boards, pins, or anything doing this, so it would be completely up to you. The V1, however, is much simpler. Everything just came straight out. Nothing was stuck together. Nothing was difficult to get to. So I would say this one, you guys just do it. Everybody do it. It's not difficult. It's easy. The V2 is quite a bit more difficult. So if you want to take on the project, do it. Quite a bit different inside both wheels. I could see that this one has 18 MOSFETs. If you look down in there, they're staggered differently as well. However, I'm not going to take it entirely apart to show you. I'm sure somebody has shown that board in a video or a picture somewhere. So again, I hope you guys appreciate the depths I go through and the details I put into all of my videos. I work very hard to help the community, both with parts for wheels to make them more manageable or more comfortable or better in some way, shape, or form. A lot of the parts I make are, they're community requested. So, if you guys have anything you need, reach out to me. I'm happy to design stuff, make things, and throw it on my Etsy for you. I do ship all over the world, so if your country is missing from the drop down and ship to locations, shoot me a message on my Etsy or Facebook and let me know. I could add it. Well, I'll quote it and then add it. Some places obviously very expensive to ship to. So again, if you want a comparison on any of the wheels, any more in-depth tearing apart, fixing, maintaining any of the wheels, drop a comment below. If you have any questions on something I may have missed when doing these teardowns, just ask. I'm pretty active. I try to get back to everybody on YouTube. But again, I hope that you guys enjoy the content and appreciate all of my efforts and support a good cause and support the Etsy if you have the funds and wants to do so. And have a beautiful day, you beautiful people.